Hi everyone, welcome to the topic 5 of the human anatomy class. In this topic, we are going to learn about the skeletal system. The adult human skeleton is made up of 206 bones. This is a very important number and you have to remember this. The components of the skeletal system are mainly the bones and the joints. And then there are different types of connective tissue which stabilizes the joints, such as the cartilages and the ligaments. Functions of the skeletal system. The main function of skeletal system is to provide a structural framework to support the body. And because the bones are hard, they protect the soft internal organs. For example, the skull bones protect the brain, the vertebrae protect the spinal cord, the rib cage inside of your chest, it is protecting the lungs, the heart. Your skeletal muscles are attached to the bones, and it is the bones and the skeletal muscles together that allow you to move. Bones also serve as storage for fats and for various minerals such as calcium and phosphorus. Inside the hollow lumen of the long bones, there is the marrow, the bone marrow. If it is a yellow bone marrow, that is fat. If it's the red bone marrow, that is the site for all of your blood cell formation, which is known as hematopoiesis. Let us understand the structure of a bone. Bones are part of the supporting connective tissue. They have special type of cells. The ECM is solid because it's mainly made up of calcium phosphate and calcium carbonate, and it also has the extracellular protein fibers. The outer covering of the bone is known as periosteum, while the inside hollow lumen of the bone is lined by the endosteum. The extracellular matrix of the bone consists of an organic and an inorganic component. The organic part is known as osteoid, while the inorganic part is made up of calcium phosphate. Now in the bone, the calcium phosphate converts into a really hard crystal of calcium hydroxyapatite, and this makes up 2/3 of the bone mass. And it is these hydroxyapatite crystals that provide the bones their compressional strength. The extracellular protein fibers in the bones are made up of mainly collagen fibers, and the collagen fibers are also considered to be the organic part of the bone. These make up 1/3 of the bone mass, and the collagen contributes to the tensile strength of the bones. That means the bones can resist stretching, and both collagen and hydroxyapatite crystals make bones extremely strong. The third part of the bone are the bone cells, which are actually only 2% of the bone mass. There are 4 types of cells present in the bones. The first one is known as osteoprogenitor or the osteogenic cells. These are stem cells. That means these are the mother cells from which other bone cells are made. The osteoprogenitor cells give rise to the immature bone cells, which are the second type of cells known as osteoblasts. Osteoblasts are bone makers. That means they help build the bone matrix. Then osteoblasts mature into the third type of bone cells known as osteocytes. So osteocytes are simply mature bone cells which are present in pockets called lacunae. The fourth type of bone cells are known as osteoclasts, which are really huge cells, and these are bone breakers. So osteoblasts are bone makers and osteoclasts are bone breakers. Bone is a very dynamic tissue. It is constantly undergoing remodeling and restructuring, and this is performed by the osteoblasts and the osteoclasts. Let's look at the 4 types of bone cells one by one. Osteoblasts are the bone makers. They are the immature bone cells, and they are responsible for secreting the organic part of the matrix. So they are the one who make the osteoid. As the matrix is made around the osteoblasts actually get trapped in these pocket-like structures called lacunae. And inside the lacunae, the osteoblasts would mature into the osteocytes. Osteocytes are mature bone cells and they remain inside the lacunae. They are arranged in concentric circles around the central canal. These concentric circles are known as lamellae. Osteocytes talk to each other by means of cytoplasmic tunnels called canaliculae. Osteocytes do not undergo mitosis, and the function of osteocytes is to maintain the bone matrix. Osteoclasts are the giant bone breakers. They break bones or they dissolve bone by the process known as bone resorption by secreting acids and very strong protein digesting enzymes. The osteoprogenitor cells are the mesenchymal stem cells that actually give rise to the osteoblasts. We find these stem cells in the outer covering of the bones, which is known as the periosteum, in the inner lining of the bone lumen, the endosteum, and surprisingly also in the covering of the cartilage called perichondrium. Why they are present in perichondrium, we will learn about it in subsequent slides. Bones can be classified in more than one way. The first can be based on their tissue organization. So for example, spongy bone versus compact bone. The second criterion is based on the markings on bone surface. And the third one is based on the shape of the bones. For example, long bone versus short bone. So in this slide, we are classifying bones based on their internal tissue organization. There are two types of bones: compact bone, which is also known as dense bone, and spongy bone, which is also known as trabecular or cancellous bone. Compact bone, as the name suggests, is very dense. It's compact, it's solid. It usually forms the outer walls of the bone and it has units which are known as osteons. The spongy bone, on the other hand, and you can also see in the figure, it looks like a sponge. It has an open network of plates and it is usually present internal to the compact bone. It surrounds the medullary cavity, which is also known as the bone marrow cavity. The trabeculae, which is the open network, it has lamellae but no osteons. Bones can also be classified by their markings on the surfaces, such as bones may have depressions, they could have projections, that means things jutting out, they could have tunnels through which blood and nerves travel. There are different categories of bone markings. For example, projections or processes could be something that is growing out of the bone. Depressions means indentations. Sometimes projections would start with the alphabet T, for example, trochanter, tubercle, while depressions would start with the letter F, for example, foramen, fissure. This table introduces you to various bone surface features, and I would say that you can please, if you could look at the anatomical terms and start memorizing them. Bones can be classified based on their shapes into four types: long bones, short bones, flat bones, and irregular bones. Long bones are longer than they are wide, and they are mostly compact bones. Examples would be all the bones of the limbs except for the wrist, ankle, and the kneecap bones, such as the femur bone, the humerus bone. These are all long bones. Short bones are usually cube-shaped. That means their length and width are almost equal. They contain mostly spongy bone. Examples would be wrist bones such as the carpals, the ankle bones, tarsals. Sesamoid bones are also a special type of short bones which are formed within tendons. For example, the patella. Flat bones are flat, thin, and may be curved. Examples would be bones of the skull, ribs, the breastbone, that is the sternum, the clavicle, which is the collarbone, the scapula, which is the shoulder blade, and the pelvis. Irregular bones do not fit into any other classification category because of their irregular shape. Examples are bones of the vertebral column, such as the vertebrae, the lower jaw bone, which is mandible, the hip bones, such as the sacrum and the coccyx. Anatomy of a long bone. A long bone such as the humerus or the femur has a shaft portion known as diaphysis. The diaphysis is mainly made up of compact bone, and the compact bone forms the walls of the long bone, and the diaphysis usually surrounds the central cavity, which is the central medullary cavity, or which is also known as the bone marrow cavity. The ends of the bones are known as epiphyses, which are mostly made up of spongy bone, and the junction between the diaphysis and the epiphysis is known as metaphysis. The outer covering of the long bones is known as the periosteum, which is made up of fibrous connective tissue. Also, the epiphyseal ends of the long bones are usually covered by the smooth hyaline cartilage, which is known as articular cartilage, and this decreases friction or rubbing at the joint surfaces. If you could rip off the periosteum from the bone surface, you would see that there are some fibers which are known as the perforating or Sharpey's fibers, and these fibers are responsible for attaching the periosteum to the underlying bone. Additionally, you would also see blood vessels such as arteries that supply the bone cells with nutrients. Remember that bones are highly vascularized tissues. I have just mentioned in one of the previous slides that at the junction of the diaphysis and the epiphysis, you would see the metaphysis. So in the metaphysis region, there is a plate. This plate is made up of hyaline cartilage, and you see this plate only in the bones of young growing individuals. And this plate separates the diaphysis from the epiphysis. All of the growth that occurs in the bone, that means when a person is growing in height and as the bones are elongating, all the growth occurs in this epiphyseal plate, and this plate has 5 zones. These are known as the growth zones. When a person becomes an adult, that means all the growth has occurred in the length of the long bones, the epiphyseal plate disappears. It changes into an epiphyseal line. So the epiphyseal line is actually a remnant of the epiphyseal plate because the bone has now stopped growing in length. All of the growth has already occurred. So in an adult long bone, you would see the epiphyseal line, while in the bone of an adolescent or a person who was still growing, you would see the epiphyseal plate. In the center of the long bone, you would see a hollow cavity which is known as the marrow or the medullary cavity. This medullary cavity houses the bone marrow. You would usually see the yellow bone marrow in adults, and this yellow bone marrow is mostly fat, while you would see the red bone marrow in infants only, and the red bone marrow is the site of blood cell formation. So that means in adults, where do you see the red bone marrow? You would see it in the cavities of the spongy bone. The spongy bone is usually present in the epiphysis. That means the ends of the long bones. This figure shows the gross anatomy of the humerus, which is a long bone.